All right, players, I'm going to make a quick video. Well, not that quick. There's a lot of holes to cover. But a video about the holes at Omni. I've ranked them in my opinion on what is most easy to most difficult. I've split it up into par 3s, par 4s, and par 5s. And I'm going to go through it here on Google Maps in a moment. Now, that might not actually match up with like each nine's handicap numbers. And that's because I'm not to get into a long story about handicap numbers, but one thing that to consider is that a handicap number on a scorecard is not necessarily a measure of difficulty. It is a measure of separation, which might sound kind of weird. You're like, what the heck is that? Isn't number one handicap the hardest hole? Not necessarily. The handicap system is on the card because it is there for the purposes of assigning strokes in match play. So let's say you have a 0 handicap playing a 10 handicap. They get 5 shots every 9 holes. The handicap system is how they determine which 5 holes that player, the 10 handicap, needs the shots on. And it's when I say it's a measure of separation, it is which holes are the better player going to have a greater advantage on than the worse player. So I'll make it a hypothetical here for a second. So let's say I'm a 0 handicap and I'm playing against a 20 handicap, right? I'm going to win most of the time in general, right? If we play a golf course where every hole is just a 1-foot putt, we will probably shoot the same score. We're both going to make the 1-foot putt every time. We're going to shoot the same score. So my skill advantage is 0 on that mythical golf course. Conversely, if we have a golf course where the holes are 1,000 yards long, let's say it's a par 7, we'll just say, 1,000-yard long par 7, even if it's wide open, no trouble anywhere, wide open, I am going to beat the 20 handicapper every single time because I'm going to hit it farther, I'm going to get to the hole in fewer shots. That player needs a shot, would need a stroke or 2 on that hole. Even though it's not hard, my advantage is great, okay? So the way that works in handicap holes, when you're looking at the handicap number, what the raters do, and I'm not saying they're always right, but what they're trying to do is identify the holes where the advantage is great for the good player. So for example, there's if you think about one of the hardest par 3s at Omni, say Vista 3, or I'm sorry, Sunshine 3, the long par 3. Now, that is a hard hole. I think it's one of the hardest holes on the property because it's 250-yard par 3. But it's hard for me, and it's hard for the 20 handicapper that I might be playing at. So it's hard for both of us. So it's not. I don't have a huge advantage on that hole. Versus say. So I hope that makes sense. Like it's a measure of the. It's not a measure of difficulty. It's how difficult is it for me relative to difficulty for them. So, like a hole say take Eldorado 5, par 5 up the hill. Like it's got forced carries, it's got lakes, it's got ponds. Like as a par 5, that hole is not particularly hard in general. It's a hard par 5, but it's an easy hole for me. And that hole might be very, very difficult for a 15 handicapper because they got to contend with the ravines and the lake and all that stuff. So it can be easy. If it's easy for me and hard for the 20 handicapper, then that'll probably be a lower handicap number on the scorecard because they need a shot there. So not to go off on a tangent, but anyway, going to the rankings here, it's funny. Like we have a Colorado PGA tournament at Omni year after year, and I always look at the score. I like to see which holes play the hardest because we play all 27 holes, field of 100 players or whatever. And the stroke average per hole doesn't really match up it's not super correlated with the handicap on the scorecard. So just know, if you see the number 1 handicap hole, don't just assume it's the hardest hole. It could be, but it might not be. It's just that's where the raters decided that 20 handicapper needs a pop versus a 5 handicapper, for example. Anyway, let's get into it. All right, let's begin the ranking of holes. Now I'm going to break these up into categories, starting with par 3s. So Omni has 6 par 3s, ranging from easy to hard, and everybody's skill set is a little bit different, but in my experience, these are the easiest to hardest in order. So starting with the par 3s, we've got the easiest one, Eldorado 2. typically downwind, not a very long hole. As I'm going through these rankings, I'm thinking about it in terms of like how easy are they to birdie or par, and also what's our possibility of like blowing up and making a big number. So, you know, this hole, El Dorado 2 from the back tee is like 150, often downwind. It's like a gap wedge, a pitching wedge for me. Only trouble is the water hazard. So if you do have trouble getting the ball airborne regularly, that could be a problem. But you know, the green is, I would say, pretty average regarding its slope. It's got, you know, most of the greens at Omni have some amount of tiering. This one has a tier, but it's not terrible. And I think, you know, with a short club in your hand, it's fairly easy to get this ball on the green, often in a good spot. Common misses will be long and left over here in the mounds, which might lead to a bogey, or you might get kind of unlucky on the green, have a tough putt over this tier. But in general, it's not that bad as long as you keep it out of the lake. All right, the second easiest par 3 we're going over here, and we are going to Sunshine number 8. Let me zoom in on it. Sunshine number 8. If I can find it, there it is. Sunshine number 8. So what makes this the second easiest hole? Well, it's not, once again, it's not super long. There's a couple of bruisers, as you know, at Omni, lengthwise. This is probably the second shortest par 3. There is a forced carry, much like a lot of the par 3s out here. The green, although severe from back to front, doesn't have very much in regards to tiers. When you're standing up here on the back tee with an elevated tee shot, typically, you know, for me, it's like a 9-iron, maybe an 8-iron. The wind is usually across from the right, which, unless you're as a right-handed player, that's not the end of the world. For most right-handed players, they're more comfortable with the wind blowing across from the right than, say, the opposite, which we'll get to in a second. But as long as you can cover the junk and avoid like a rope hook down by the cart path over here, where that's some tough up and downs, you know, this ball is fairly easy, relatively speaking, to the other par 3s to get it on the green. And although it is severely sloped, and there can be some hole locations that are challenging, in general, it's pretty straightforward. At least you're not dealing with major tiers. So that's the second easiest par 3. All right, moving on. Third easiest par 3. I would nominate Vista 2. So downhill into the wind usually. It does have a fairly wide landing area as long as you cover this rock wall. So as long as you cover the rock wall, it's hard to make a big number. There is a significant tier, but that's kind of the norm at Omni. I wouldn't say it's kind of an average tier for Omni. It's not particularly daunting. The green is fairly big. Side note, I've also made a hole-in-one on this hole, so I have a soft spot for it. It's the only one I've had at Omni. And I think it's a kind of an average difficulty of the 6 par 3s. It's number 3. All right, moving back across the road here. The fourth hardest par 3. El Dorado 6, up the hill, about the same club into the wind, similar club to the last hole, I think, about the same distance. Sometimes it plays a little longer being uphill. You can see it's definitely a narrower landing area, so even though you don't have the big trouble in front, you got more side-to-side trouble, and it is long enough that those are in play. You know, it's for me, it's oftentimes 6, 7, 8 iron, depending on the wind and the hole location. And the green is pretty tricky. For a Omni green, I would say it's above average difficulty with regards to lots of different tiers. I think there's 4 or even 5 separate little sections on this green. There's like a tiny one here. So it is kind of hard with a mid iron or longer to get on the right tier and have a realistic look at birdie. You know, and it's easy to miss the green side to side, I would say, into the wind. Fourth hardest par 3. Now we've got the two monsters of the par 3s. You know what they are. What order am I going to put them in? I think the next most difficult one is out here on Sunshine. Of the two, I think this is slightly easier. You guys know the two. So this is Sunshine number 3, beast mode, long hole. It's like 250 from the back tee. Typically it is downwind, so that does help. And it's oftentimes like straight downwind, so that does help straighten out shots. The green is not particularly daunting. It's fairly big. It doesn't have a lot of crazy tiers. You know, most shots I see on this hole end up on grass. You know, it's not necessarily easy to make a birdie by any means since you're hitting a long club in there, but it's fairly easy to get out of there with a bogey at worst. You can just keep it somewhere on the grass, left of the cart path, and out of this stuff long. So although it is long and difficult, it is not as hard as the hardest one, which is, in my opinion, this one. Yeah, that's it. Vista 5. Hardest par 3 on the course, especially for right-handers. So reasons why it's long. Number one, it's long. Typically the wind is coming off of the left, which makes it tougher for right-handers, and you can't sometimes even feel it because of all this trees and kind of a big mound here. So sometimes you can't even feel how severe the wind is. For a right-hander, any ball that gets up in the air with a push or a fade, especially with the wind, it's very easy. This all slopes towards the native area. It's very easy to have balls bouncing over here and getting either lost or you know, tough up and downs out of the native. The bunker is not necessarily a very easy spot. And because of right-handers' tendency to hit like hot poles, it's also easy to kind of kick it over here off the path. This is a big downslope, so everything kicks away. You can find your ball down here in this weird grass with kind of a flop shot over the trees. The green itself isn't terribly severe, but it is shaped in a way that is like unfortunate for right-handers. In other words, it's shaped in this kind of an ellipse. And a right-hander, whether you hit a fade or a draw, almost every right-hander, if they miss it to the right, it's going to be short, which is bunker down this hill, and left is going to be long, which puts these trees and hills and stuff into play. So the miss pattern isn't great. It's hard to hit this one close. It's hard to make a birdie. It's actually, I've made a mess of this hole multiple times. You know, you get one gets away into the wind and soars over here. So it actually, you can blow up pretty easy on this hole. I think it is the hardest par 3 on the property. All right, next up, let's discuss the par 5s at Omni. Once again, there's 6 of them, ranking from easiest to most difficult. I think there are 2, you know, easier than most. You can think about it in tiers. So number 9, Eldorado, in my opinion, is the easiest of the par 5s for a couple of reasons. It's pretty short. Many players have the opportunity to go for it in 2. This rock wall, although it looks daunting and looks difficult, is really not a big problem for most of the time. It's not a hazard. And unless you end up right next to the rocks, it's barely even a problem unless you end up within the 2 or 3 yards short of it. So that rock wall is not a big deal. Off the tee, it is often downwind. It's downhill. You'll see some of your biggest drives of the day typically on this hole. It's kind of a nice finishing hole on Eldorado after you've just played like 5 straight holes dead into the wind. Starting on 4, you play 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 into the wind, typically if it's a windy day at Omni, and then you finally get a downhill, downwind, short, reachable par 5. The green, not terribly severe. Certainly it's not the easiest green, but I would say it's kind of an average Omni green without a big tier. It's just got some kind of back to front with some varying severity. Bunkers aren't too tough of a spot to get away from. If you miss hit your drive, the layup is wide open, very easy to hit an easy layup. Or if you can't get to the green, the layup is a piece of cake. It's super wide. So that is one that is, you know, I don't like to use the word birdie hole, but it's one that is very gettable. So easiest par 5 on the course. All right, next easiest par 5 on the golf course. Let me find it. Oh, I'm blanking here. Ah, there it is. Sunshine number 6. Also, downhill, downwind off the tee. It's a little narrower off the tee in general, like fairway-wise. Oops, let me flip this around. Oh, come on, technical. Yeah, there we go. There. So we tee off from up here. The big error I see on this hole most of the time, if anybody does get in trouble off the tee, it's they're trying to cut too much off, or they go for this big cover on the bunker and miss it a little left. This can be pretty loosey in the summer. So, you know, I try to kind of favor the right side. It kicks left, and if you end up in this rough, it's not the end of the world. If it's really downwind, you can, you know, there's a big slope here. They call it the speed slot. You can really get it far down there. I mean, some, you know, long hitters can have a wedge or less into this hole if it's a really dry, windy day. But even, players that don't hit it that far can maybe go for the green from up top. The layup is pretty easy if you don't want to go for it. And the green overall is very friendly, except for the very back little portion. If the flag is back in this back portion, you got to be a little bit careful on your approach. Long is usually really bad to that whole location, or really anywhere. It's just hard to hit this little window spot. So, I'd say 80% of the time the flag is somewhere on the front. Everything filters towards it. And even your misses, if they're short, that's not a very difficult up and down. So it is the second easiest par 5 on the golf course. Cruising along here, a couple holes later, third easiest par 5 on the course is going to be Sunshine number 9. Also downwind. Can be gettable. Let me get rid of this arrow. Can be gettable. The only major error I see off the tee here is, once again, same as 6. Players getting a little too aggressive with the line. I tend to try to hit it basically towards this right rough line. So most of my shots will end up either barely in the fairway or barely in the rough. And if I'm going to miss it, I'm going to miss it right. All this stuff, you can still go for the green unless you have some kind of a tree in the way. Now, when it comes to going for the green, this bunker is another possible blow-up spot, particularly the right side. Depending on the sand conditions, it is very easy to send this one over into the other bunker or even into the water. I typically will either, if I have a longish club in, I will try to basically land the ball short of the green and hope it kicks up, knowing that if it lands over here, like in the rough towards the bunker, it might stay short of that bunker, because that bunker is kind of a problem. If I have a shorter club in, let's say it's downwind or I hit the fairway, I'll try to land it somewhere on the front. This green doesn't slope very much from back to front, so balls that land on the green from long range tend to release and roll over the back, which is another reason why I typically will just try to be landing it somewhere around this upslope, this little bowl area. And then the green can be, it's got some tiers, nothing that's scary by any means. I see a lot of players misread this one, but it definitely is fairly flat from back to front. So a lot of players, they'll be thinking balls will break towards the front. If you're putting across this green, it's usually pretty straight. The big error on this hole might be a tee shot left, a second shot into this bunker. Certainly, layups into this bunker are no good. 50-yard bunker shots, those can get kind of troubling. But it's a hole that you can take advantage of. Third easiest par 5. All right, next. Now we're getting into kind of middle of the roadish par 5s. We're going out to Vista 4, way out here. So not a lot of major trouble on Vista 4, especially if you keep the ball up the right. It's a long hole, typically uphill, or always uphill, typically into the wind though. So it can be a hard one to reach into even for long hitters, depending on the day. However, the tee shot isn't particularly challenging as long as you keep it to the right. There's some room over here between these two holes. Boy, it's snowy out here today on the Google Maps. The layup shot isn't particularly challenging. I mean, it might be kind of long into the wind, but it's wide enough. And the green has a little bit of a severe tier, but it can be useful if the flag is in that pocket. You can filter a lot of shots into there. The bunker isn't particularly bad news. There is kind of this horseshoe ring here. Typically what I like to do if I'm going for it, I'm kind of favoring the left side most of the time, so that, if I can chip it from here to almost any hole location pretty easily. I'll try to cover the bunker if I've got, less yardage in. Maybe it's a less windy day or I really pump a drive. I might just try to fly it on the green. But a lot of times I'm just trying to kind of hit it up here. This is a real amphitheater type of area. In other words, if you kind of hit a hot one in here, this rough is all sloping towards you, so you can, ball will die out pretty quick. It's not going to kick over that hill too often. So not an easy one, not a hard one, kind of an average one. Which brings us to the 5th hardest par 5. That was ranked one. Yeah, that was 4. All right, 5th hardest par 5. I believe it is Vista 8. Let me flip this around. Vista 8, kind of a hard par 5. I think if I said par 4, I apologize. Kind of a hard par 5. It certainly is reachable for long hitters. You can hit it out here somewhere over the bunker, the fairway. Gets a little narrow. It is downwind often. The big error I see often here is people trying to cut too much off the corner. This out of bounds on the right does sneak in pretty quickly. So out of bounds right is definitely a possibility if you're being aggressive off the tee. The second reason it's not that easy is because the second shot, let's say you hit it up here on this top shelf, and you're going to go for it. It's kind of a long way to cover all these bunkers and hold the green. And a lot of times, even if you get it, pump it down here a little bit further, you end up in the rough because it's narrow, or on these like little down slopes, and you're hitting uphill over these like big bunkers. It's really hard to kind of hit the green into. It's not that it's not possible, but you got to hit a shot out of the rough or from a downslope that's high enough to cover the bunker and still stop on the green. That makes it difficult. And these bunkers aren't that easy, particularly this one, the second one here, or the one shorter, because now you've got like a bunker shot over another bunker to a flag. The green itself isn't particularly scary. There's a big false front that sometimes gets people in trouble. But it's not that it's that hard to make a birdie on it, but I see it's definitely possible to blow up with a tee shot out of bounds, tee shot through the fairway, making a mess from these bunkers. So it's kind of a hard birdie for a par 5. And then there's only one left, so you can probably guess which one it is. It is, I think, let me find it. There we go. The hardest par 5. Eldorado 5. So now all par 5s, especially for longer hitters, all par 5s are opportunities for birdie. So that's not that it's hard. It's just, this one's probably the hardest of the bunch. So the tee shot, some players can't hit driver here because they might run out. Typically it's into the wind. Once again, it's uphill. Shots missed to the left. This, if you cover this bunker on the left, it is dead. It's going to roll down into the hazard. And even if you, this is a very blow up spot here. If you hit it into the hazard because our drop is here, there's a tree, you got to hit it over the tree. So you're trying to hit it in the crap, take a drop, hit it over the tree, which leaves you a long ways in. If you're not going to mess with this left side, then that puts you over here on the right, and you are likely half the time in one of these bunkers with sometimes high lip, sometimes tricky spots. So, the tee shot's not that easy. Some players even struggle getting it over the water here, which is totally understandable. And then from there, let's say you hit the fairway. Well, let's say you don't. So if you don't hit the fairway, it's kind of a tough second shot. Even if you do hit the fairway, the layup is easy. Okay, the layup is easy. But if you're going to go for the green, it's uphill, it's far. Nobody's hitting a short club into this hole ever. And then up around the green is where this hole also has major teeth with the 3 big tiers that are a major problem. I think this is the most difficult green on the course overall, just because there's simply nothing you can do to stop the golf ball if you get the ball beyond the tier you want. So if the flag's in the front and you end up anywhere beyond that line, whether it's chipping, pitching, or whatever, there's no way to get it on this tier, almost no way, unless you can get really lucky or fancy, but anything beyond that line is going to be tough. Also, if the pin's in the middle tier and you hit it beyond it, it's going to be hard to get it on the middle tier without it rolling off. And then the back tier is like a turtle in the back, so it slopes off on all sides. Back hole location, if you leave it short on the approach, it's coming back, and that's a tricky pitch up this slope. So the green is really tough, on top of, a lot of trouble can be had off the tee. So that's why I think it's the hardest par 5 on the course. All right, on to the par 4s. Now there's lots of them, so I'm going to try to blaze through the par 4s from easiest to hardest. I kind of have them tiered up here. So there's it's hard to rank them totally. I did my best. I'll start with the easiest. It's not that one. The easiest one, Vista 6. Simply because it is very short. Not most, but many players can drive the green or get it close. For me, it's not even a driver. A lot of the times it's 3-wood or hybrid. Although the green is well bunkered, there's a lot of opportunity to hit it on the green, right around the green, get up and down. And as long as you don't hit it left into this stuff, the right miss typically will land short. If you're going for the green and you blow it way right, typically that will stay short of the path because of how shot patterns work. In other words, if you miss it to the right, it's oftentimes going to be short of what you'd want anyway. So as long as we don't hit it left of the bunkers, it's a fairly easy shot. If you are laying it up, it's, you know, you hit it to this area and you've got 70, 80 yards in, 90 yards in, it's not too bad either. I'm not saying any hole I expect to birdie, but, you know, this is one where I would say it's the most birdieable hole on the course as far as par fours go. Next easiest. We're staying on Vista here. So Vista has two of the easiest par fours. We've got Vista 3. Once again, very short hole. I'm not saying it's drivable for everybody, but you can definitely punch it up there pretty far. I don't usually advocate laying back on this hole just because the layup is actually pretty narrow. So I think for almost all players, I think you send it with driver. There is an argument to be made that you know, this green is very severe, back to front, and sometimes a front hole location can be hard to get to. But I would suggest that even from 80 yards, it's not that easy to get to. Even, you know, I'd sometimes rather have 30 yards just because I'm more likely to hit the green in general. The big mistake that people make on this hole is not giving the hill enough respect. They get behind the hole, they putt down, and can roll it off the front, and then if they're down here, not getting it back up the hill, having it come back to their feet. So the hill is definitely a problem, but if you learn how to manage the hill and give the green proper respect when you're putting downhill, it is a, you know, relatively, I'd say it's one of the easiest par fours on the golf course. Third easiest par four. We're going to Sunshine number 4. So not a long hole, shaped the right way, especially if you're right-handed. It's possible to go for it, although I think that's more of a situation you would do that in a scramble or a team event, something like that, and get a guy in play. You can go for the green, but I don't think it should be the shot if you're playing individual stroke play. I would say in match play, it's probably okay to go for it if you have the firepower to do so, but you know, it's not there's a lot of trouble around the green. I'd say this is more of a, like I said, team event, scramble event. We can go for the green in those situations, but otherwise we're going to play it straight. Off the tee, it's, for a lot of players, it's not their longest club. It's, you know, not a driver for many players. And the second shot, depending on where you leave it in this corridor here, is typically less than 130 yards to a green that, although it is severe, it kind of funnels towards a lot of the hole locations. My general rule of thumb hitting into this green is to try to hit it between the tiers above whatever tier is on. So, okay, so if the flag is on the right, try to hit it here on the right edge of the green. If the flag is in the back pocket there, try to hit it onto this slope. If the flag is in the front pocket, try to hit it onto this slope. Ball, you know, depending on how far you have left, the ball typically will want to roll down or spin down up to one tier. So that's kind of the default way I play it. It is the third easiest par 4. Okay, next up, moving over here. Where am I going? There we go. Next easiest par 4, in my opinion, Eldorado 7. Although into the wind, it is short, relatively speaking. For many players, they don't have to hit driver. You can punch it down here to this little tongue and leave yourself 70, 60, 50 yards. My preference is to hit it back here just a little bit short of the second bunker, which leaves me still, you know, a wedge in 120, 130 yards. The tee shot, you know, since you're not necessarily hitting your longest club, it shouldn't be that big of a problem to get it in play. The big difficulty here is just how close the hazard is to the left side. So just be careful on left hole locations, especially the back left hole location. This is one where people will send it long left and get in trouble. But the green is pretty benign, not a whole lot going on. And as long as you don't get aggressive and try to like stuff it to a back left hole location, you should be fine. 1, 2, 3, 4. Moving on. 5th ranked par 4. We're going out here to Eldorado. Staying on Eldorado. Eldorado number 4. So once again, it doesn't have to be driver. In fact, a big error I see a lot of players like searching for balls in here off the tee, and I'm always wondering, like, why are they trying to hit driver? It's just not wide enough. You know, the the best spot is somewhere about even or just short of this bunker, somewhere right in here, which is still going to leave you, 130 yards, manageable for most players. I don't really see any major errors. You can, if you do hit it past the hole much on a front hole location, this hill is very severe. So if the flag is on the front left tier or front left section, just be aware, just try not to hit it over the green or onto the back right. This is a good example where center of the green isn't necessarily a good target if the flag is in the front portion of the green. You're better off being, at it or a little short. And then if the flag is in the back, I don't mind, making sure we take this bunker out of play. These chips aren't too bad from back here either. So fairly benign. Once again, I think I've used that word too much, so I'm going to try to stop using it. But, relatively average green, pretty short hole, and it is the 5th most challenging in my opinion. Now, in this middle of the pack, I would say a lot of these holes kind of blend together. I kind of had to sit there and just be like, okay, is this one easier or is that one easier? And it's not super cut and dried on these ones. But moving along, my next, number 6, so kind of starting to enter middle of the pack difficulty. I would say Eldorado 8. Excuse me. Middle of the pack difficulty. For most players, it's going to be a driver off the tee. And then second shot, it's not a long second shot relative to a lot of them. The green doesn't have anything crazy going on. It's fairly nondescript. It's a cool hole. It's a blind tee shot. But I think it's just kind of an average hole at Omni. I don't really have a whole lot to say about it. So we'll just move on. Moving on to the 7th hardest hole, par 4 at Omni. I'm going to go over to Sunshine 1. I think this next stretch of holes, I think is all about the same in difficulty. Sunshine 1. Into the wind, fairly ample off the tee, no real issues. It's hard to lose a ball anywhere. I mean, even right of the path, you've got quite a bit of space before the road. I think that what makes this hole a little challenging is the front neck here. If you do leave yourself a little farther in, if you leave yourself a long shot in, you kind of have to respect this front little neck. For people that have to roll it up to the green, it can be a challenge. The green itself has a little collection pocket here, collection pocket back there, and then kind of a high little tier here. Once again, nothing too crazy. I wouldn't say it's particularly easy or difficult. Much like the next one, Vista 1. 8th most challenging. So this is like middle of the pack, right? Vista 1, I would suggest, is a pretty easy starting hole. It is kind of long. It is a little bit uphill, but the tee shot's very friendly, super wide off the tee. Hard to lose a ball there. Second shot, although it's uphill, the green is fairly straightforward. There's no big tiers, no big air shoes. I don't really see a whole lot of big problems on this hole. It's hard to blow up on it. I mean, you can bogey any hole, of course, but it's not really. It'd be a tough one to blow up on, in my opinion. Moving on, here we are right in the meat of the par 4s, middle of the pack. One of the, nondescript holes at the course. Sunshine 5, similar. A little narrower off the tee than some, but still it's uphill. It's catchy, the slopes all go in, so as long as you keep it out of the partners group building, you should be fine. Left is fairly findable, even if you do hit it left. And this, it's hard to hit it up into the native just because if it lands in this rough on this hill, it's not too bad. Or it's not going to run up into the native from there. Kind of contains it. Uphill, no bunkers. I might be the only hole on the course without a bunker. Can't say that for sure. And then the green, simple green, 2 tiers. Nothing crazy. I like to, it's sometimes hard from the fairway to tell where the flag is, which tier it's on. Especially if it's like in this middle part of the green. If it's left, it's front. If it's right, it's back. But what I'll do is I'll just drive my cart up just to this like little hill right here at like 130 and just take a glance because I just kind of want to try to get my ball on the correct tier. So if I'm unsure, I'll drive up there and just try to make sure I know which tier the flag is on. If it is on the front tier, I will say it is severe enough of a tier where you're gonna have if you hit it past and you're somewhere back in here with the flag in the front, you could very well have an impossible shot. That can be one way to make a mistake, or one way to make a big number here is hit it over and then blow it down here into this like collection area and not get that up and down. That's a double waiting to happen, but that's probably the most common one that I see on that hole when somebody's going to blow up, is they airmail their second shot to a frontier hole location. All right, what is that? Sun 5. Next hardest hole. Let's go over here. We're going over to Sun 2. So this is starting to be some of the harder holes out here. We're entering into the more challenging ones. Sun 2. Off and into the wind. The tee shot's kind of narrow. I don't know. Well, I shouldn't say I don't know. I don't know how many of you are aware of this little cutout on the left between these holes where it's grassy. I like to hit my tee shot so it ends up just short of that cutout. That way, if I pull it a hair, trying to avoid this hazard, if I pull it, I can be in this like little snow patch area. Hopefully it's summer and it's not snowy, but it doesn't get up into this native area. So I don't try to punch it all the way down here. I try to punch it down here about, leaving myself about 125, 135, 145. Plays quite a bit uphill, often into the wind, so it plays a little longer. And this false front on the front here can definitely roll balls back. But as far as the green goes, kind of I would say an average amount of tearing for Omni, nothing super scary. Nothing where you're gonna like have no control of your golf ball. What was that number? 1, 2, that was 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, moving on. Now we're getting into the top 5 hardest par 4s out here. So getting into the top 5 hardest par 4s, I believe El Dorado 1 is one of them. El Dorado 1. Doesn't seem that hard, but it is kind of shaped the wrong way for a right-hander. It pinches in where a lot of people like to hit their tee shots, so these bunkers are a problem for some people. And if you hit it far enough to carry the bunkers regularly on one El Dorado, it's very easy to overshoot, go through the fairway. Little hooks tend to like to skip over the path. There's some trees over here. It can be a little challenging. So I think the tee shot's actually kind of sneaky hard on one Eldo, but it does make up for that. The green and the whole green complex is relatively easy. So other than the fact that the tee shot's kind of hard, this isn't that hard of a hole. If you do lay up, back off the tee, you do leave yourself kind of a long ways in. If you try to take the bunkers out of play, you leave 180, which is kind of a long approach shot. So in order to leave yourself a manageable approach, you do have to, put either the bunkers in play or some of this left nonsense in play. I would say if you hit a good tee shot, it's not that hard from there. All right, moving into the top 4 hardest. See if you can guess where I'm going. I mean, you know what's coming. You know what's left on this list. El Dorado 3. I think this is a very reasonably hard hole at Omni. So it is downwind, which can be helpful. It pinches up in here. A lot of times players don't like hitting driver because it does get pretty narrow for some players' drivers. This is nice and wide back in here, but it does leave kind of a sizable second shot, 173, with maybe a carry over a bunker. This green has a big swale in the middle. It's easy. I would say it's a challenging hole to get it close. The ball doesn't really filter towards any of the hole locations. There's some tough up and downs from these bunkers, and this all slopes away over here. So I think it's a combination. I mean, any tee shot that gets left of these bunkers is bouncing down into hazard. If you rip one up the right, you either have a blind shot or from the rough, or a shot out of the native. It's just not that easy to make birdies here, and it's fairly easy to make bogeys and doubles. So that's why it's up there amongst the hardest. All right. Top 3 hardest coming down the stretch. What are they? What order will they be in? First one up in the top 3 hardest, number 9 Vista. Lots of ways to mess this hole up. So we start off with a tee shot. If you lay up at all, you have a very long second shot. So if you try to take the bunker out of play, it's 190 left, which is not good to like an island green. In order to cover, if you want to hit it up even with the bunker, it's narrow, so that's not that easy. And if you want to take it over the bunker, which is what I usually try to do. You know, it's narrow, and a lot of times you're in the rough. I mean, it's hard to hit it down here to the end of the fairway to have an easy shot. So the tee shot, it's easy. You can hit it out of bounds, you can hit it in the hazard, you can hit it in the bunker. If you decide to take those 3 options out of play, it leaves you a very long second shot. So it's a tough tee shot. It's a tough finishing hole for Vista. And then the green is kind of no joke. There's a huge tier here. So, you know, if the flag is anywhere over here and you're long, it's really bad. And this is actually pretty shallow. So any of these right hole locations, it's easy to leave it in the bunker. Actually, is that bunker still there? I can't remember. I think that bunker's gone. This bunker's gone. How old is this Google Maps? Anyway, God, I don't think those bunkers are there. I think they're grass bunkers now. I could be wrong. Regardless, long grass bunker, dead, short grass bunker, not optimal. Hard to hit this little shelf, and if you don't hit this little shelf and the flag's over here, you definitely have some kind of a weird tiery putt. So the green, I think, is one of the tougher greens on the course. The tee shot's one of the tougher tee shots on the course. There's definitely lots of ways to blow up. Vista 9 is a monster. And it's not the hardest, but it's up there. All right, that leaves the 2 final hardest holes. What's the order going to be? In my opinion, next on the list is Sun 7. Sun 7. So long hole, it's like 480 from the back tee, but it is downhill a lot, so it doesn't play that. The problem with 7 is that you've kind of got 2 options, or you're taking on a huge, well, you've got one kind of risk-free option, which is to lay it back right here off the tee, which is fine. It's not that hard of a shot, although it's not as easy as it looks. The wind can be a problem coming off the left. And if you take that option, you do leave yourself a pretty beefy second shot, you know, 190 or more, which isn't necessarily easy at all. So if you take an easy tee shot, you have a hard second shot. If you decide to blast driver down here as far as you can, you have a hard tee shot. So you might have an easy second shot, but you have a hard tee shot. It's easy to hit it into the hazard gone. It's easy to lose it on this hill. And if maybe you're can't get it all the way down here and you're forced to like hit it into this bottleneck, well, that's not that easy either. It's narrow. There's not much fairway in there. It's drop off here hazard, a bunch of rough over here. You know, in the winter it's easier because a lot of this native will kick back. But in the summer, this stuff is loosey, specifically in like June and July when it's really thick. This is a hard one. It's basically, you pick your poison off the tee. Do you want a easier tee shot and a tough second shot, or a hard tee shot and an easier second shot? There's no really alternative. Now, around the green, left is dead, and it could be really dead. So if you miss the ball even a little left of the green, you've all seen it. It can hit this harsh downslope, kick through the bunker into the hazard, or it can hit the edge of, you know, any of these bunker lips have the potential of being all the way into the hazard gone. So that's a big blow up possibility. And none of these little pitches and chips around here are all that easy. You got to kind of navigate these little mounds. One thing interesting about this green is it does slope heavy left to right, and also slightly front to back overall, which is unusual, and that causes a lot of people to have problems with their speed control. Typically, the way I play this hole is I hit it down here. I hit a 3-iron, 4-iron down to here, and then I like to just aim for this front right corner of the green. I have a long club in my hand, typically 180 out, 190 out. I just like to get it down in here, the safest general area, regardless of where the hole location is, and just try to get out of here with the par. And if I make a bogey here, so be it. I'm okay with that. This is one where any mistake anywhere is insta double or worse. So play accordingly. That leaves us the final, in my opinion, the most difficult par 4 on the course. Vista 7. Long, downhill, exposed, windy, typically hard left to right. The tee shot, trouble left. Everything over here bounces left, hazard. Anything right, bounces right, OB. So tough tee shot. Plus it's downhill, which effectively makes it play narrower, right? When you're hitting way downhill, the ball is in the air for longer, and so the dispersion spreads out. Get a wider dispersion hitting down a big hill. Conversely, if you're hitting way uphill, your dispersion shrinks because the ball isn't in the air as long. Your pattern will be tighter. So we've got Mega downhill, oftentimes mega wind off the left, which is right-hander's worst nightmare. Any ball that starts right, it's in the air for 12 seconds, it's out of bounds, and if you try to like work it against it, it's easy to overhook it. So tee shot, definitely one of the toughest out here. And then if you do successfully navigate the tee shot, we often have like down slopes, we're out of the rough. Sometimes if you're playing conservative off the tee, taking less than driver or 3-wood, you might find yourself a long ways in. And we've got, hazard we've got to get over, especially if you don't hit it super far. If you're way back here, you've got to cover off of a downslope, super impossible. And then the green itself, I would say the front half of the green, friendly. Front half friendly, all the putts are friendly, all the chips are friendly. Back half of the green, awful. Big turtleback, mega drop-offs everywhere. You miss the green here, it rolls all the way down into this little collection area. So back hole locations in particular, very challenging, easy to miss the green and find yourself in virtually impossible up and down situations. So even though the green, putting on this green isn't terrible, but missing this green anywhere to a back hole location is sketchy. So I think it's the hardest hole, though there's lots of ways to blow up on it. All right, thanks for following along. Let me know if you have differences of opinion. Obviously, holes can be hole difficulty is it's not an exact science, and it is dependent often on your particular set of skills. Like honestly, right-handers and left-handers will usually have quite different opinions on what is easy and hard. Also, if you're a low ball hitter or a short hitter or a long hitter or a crooked hitter, different types of holes can give you different types of problems. But I've done lots of playing lessons on the course. I think this is a fairly accurate ranking, but let me know if you have any issues. I'd be interested to hear what you think. If you agree, disagree, totally disagree, etc.